In September 1695, off the western coast of India, a sailor counted out his own retirement. His name was Henry Every. His share of one morning's work came to an estimated 1,000 pounds, plus a handful of gemstones. An honest merchant sailor of his day earned roughly 15 pounds a year. Every was holding something like 50 years of wages. Around him, more than 100 men were doing the same arithmetic. They had just taken the ganj-i-sawai, a treasure ship of the Mughal emperor, carrying cargo valued at somewhere between 325,000 and 600,000 pounds. It remains one of the largest robberies ever recorded at sea. Every man on that deck was now rich. And every man on that deck now faced the hardest problem in his industry. Not the taking of money, the keeping of it. Piracy in the Golden Age was a business with excellent revenue and one fatal design flaw. It had no exit. The average pirate career lasted an estimated 2 years. It ended in one of 3 ways: disease, battle, or a rope. Retirement was the 4th option. It was so rare that the men who clearly achieved it can be counted on one hand. What follows is the business case for getting out of piracy, priced line by line. The numbers say the exit was the worst product the industry ever offered.
To understand the demand for retirement, start with the workforce. Pirates of the Golden Age were young. The great majority were under 30. Most had come from merchant ships or the Royal Navy, where an able seaman's pay was fixed at 24 shillings a month, a rate set in 1653 and never adjusted. A merchant sailor did slightly better, at 25 to 30 shillings, when his owners did not cheat him of it. Piracy, by comparison, offered equity. Under the articles most crews signed, plunder was divided in shares, with an ordinary hand holding one full share of every prize. A single successful cruise could pay a deckhand more than a legal career ever would. That was the recruitment pitch, and it worked. Notice, though, what the pitch never mentioned. Legal seafaring, for all its miseries, had an off-ramp. A merchant sailor could grow old, come ashore, and keep his wages, such as they were. His money was clean, his name was his own, and no institution on earth was paying for his capture. The pirate's compensation package inverted every one of those terms. His pay was enormous and radioactive. His name, once attached to a prize, appeared in depositions, in newspapers, and on proclamations that crossed the Atlantic faster than he could. The industry had, in effect, traded the pension for the signing bonus and hoped nobody would live long enough to notice.
But the contract had a clause nobody read aloud. The pay was survivable only if the career was short. An estimated average of 2 years separated a man's first prize from his death. Disease killed without ceremony. Battle killed faster. And from 1700 onward, the gallows worked in volume. So every pirate who lived past his first year held the same growing asset and the same growing problem. He had money he could not legally own. In a career he could not legally leave. Under a name he could not safely use ashore. Demand for an exit was universal. Supply was almost zero. That gap is the subject of this episode. 3 products eventually appeared to fill it. A man could vanish and pay for the vanishing. He could buy protection from a colonial governor. Or, for one narrow window beginning in 1717, he could accept a corporate buyout from the British Crown. Each product had a price. Each had a failure rate. By the end, the failure rates will look less like misfortune and more like the design of the market itself.
Begin with the price list. The first exit product was disappearance. It sounds free. It was not. A pirate who wanted to vanish needed passage on a ship whose captain asked no questions, and silence was a service that billed by the risk. He needed a new name, in a new port, with a story that survived a tavern conversation. Above all, he needed to convert loot into money. Stolen goods moved at a deep discount because the fence carried the legal risk and priced it in. Silks, jewels, and plate might change hands for a fraction of declared value. The conversion cost was the largest single expense of retirement, and it was paid precisely when the retiree was most visible. There were secondary costs as well.
A vanished man could never claim an inheritance, sign a contract, or seek a court's protection, because every legal act risked reconnecting him to his record. Disappearance was not a transaction. It was a permanent operating expense, billed for the rest of his life. The second product was official protection. In North Carolina, Governor Charles Eden pardoned the pirate Blackbeard in June 1718 and let him settle in the town of Bath. Contemporary rumor held that Eden ignored pirate activity along his coast in exchange for a share of the proceeds. If the rumor was true, protection was not a purchase, but a subscription. It lapsed the moment the protector's own position weakened. A retirement plan built on one official's goodwill was an asset with a single point of failure.
The third product arrived on the 5th of September 1717. King George I issued the Proclamation for Suppressing of Pirates, known in the trade as the King's Pardon. The terms were simple. Any pirate who surrendered to a colonial governor before the 5th of September 1718 walked free. No trial, no forfeiture spelled out in the headline. For an industry with no exit, this was an extraordinary offer. A full acquisition of the workforce, priced at zero. But the fine print carried the risk. The pardon covered past crimes only. One prize taken after surrender restored a man's full criminal history, with interest. The Crown was not forgiving pirates. It was converting them into hostages of their own paperwork. The rollout was handled like a market intervention, because it was one. In January 1718, the Crown appointed Woodes Rogers, a former privateer, as Captain General and Governor-in-Chief of the Bahamas. That July, Rogers sailed into Nassau harbor with 7 ships and the pardon in hand. Nassau at that moment was the industry's headquarters, a functioning pirate republic with its own customs, its own labor market, and no government to speak of. Rogers did not besiege it. He opened an office in it. Pirates walked in as outlaws and walked out as subjects, and the republic that had survived every naval patrol dissolved in front of a signature. It was the cheapest conquest in the history of the empire, and the entire budget was paper. Eligibility for retirement was not evenly distributed. Consider the two ends of the ship. A captain held the largest share of every prize, sometimes double an ordinary man's, and so reached retirement capital fastest. But a captain was also famous. His name traveled on wanted notices faster than his ship traveled on wind. Fame raised the price of his disappearance and shortened the life of any bribe. The ordinary deckhand had the opposite portfolio. He was anonymous, which made him easy to hide. He was also poor, which made him easy to tempt back to sea. And anonymity had a ceiling. A common sailor could hide his name, but not his trade. His hands, his gait, his vocabulary, and his sunburn identified his profession to anyone on a waterfront, and his profession was the first question any magistrate would ask about. The safest retiree was therefore a man who could pass as something other than a sailor. Almost none of them could. The sea was the only skill the industry hired for, and the one skill retirement could not use. The record of Every's crew shows how both profiles failed. After the ganj-i-sawai, the company scattered across the Atlantic world, each man carrying his 1,000 pounds into ordinary ports. They were sailors with the purses of merchants, and the mismatch was visible. 24 of them were eventually captured. 6 were condemned in London. On the 25th of November, 1696, 5 of them were hanged at Execution Dock. One crewman, John Dan, escaped the rope by turning king's witness against the men he had sailed with. The lesson entered the industry's folklore. A pirate's greatest liability was not the Navy. It was a former colleague with a better lawyer. And over all of them stood the bounty system. The government and the East India Company together placed rewards on Every's company, rising to 1,000 pounds for Every himself in what has been called the first worldwide manhunt. Retirement, in other words, created its own hunting economy. The moment a pirate stopped earning, he became the prize. Now follow the money ashore, because this is where most retirements actually died. The industry had purpose-built ports for spending.
The template was Port Royal in Jamaica. By 1680, the town held more than 100 taverns, roughly one for every 10 residents. In July 1661 alone, 40 new tavern licenses were granted. Contemporary accounts describe mariners squandering thousands of Spanish reals in a single night. Port Royal was not a place to store wealth. It was a machine for removing it. And the machine served a rational customer. Consider the incentives from the deckhand side. His life expectancy in the trade was measured in a couple of years. Saving assumed a future. His industry did not offer one. Spending everything within reach of the dock was not madness. It was a reasonable response to the actuarial table he lived under. The taverns were simply the counterparty, collecting at the highest rate a doomed clientele would bear. Nassau, the pirate republic of the 1710s, ran the same machine with newer parts. Taverns, gambling, and every adjacent vice stood ready at the dock. Merchants absorbed pirate silver without asking where it had been. The service was efficient, and from a retirement standpoint, catastrophic. A share that represented years of wages could return to the local economy in weeks. Then the sailor, broke again, signed for another cruise. The ports did not merely serve the pirate economy, they recycled its labor force. Note who was actually accumulating wealth in this arrangement. Not the men who boarded the ships. The tavern keepers, the merchants, and the fences took their margins on every transaction, twice. Once when they bought stolen goods below value, and again when they sold drink and comfort above it. They slept ashore, under their own names, with their money in plain sight. In modern terms, the ports were selling shovels in a gold rush, except the gold arrived pre-stolen, and the miners were scheduled to hang. It was the only reliably profitable position in the entire industry, and no pirate held it. The deeper problem was structural. A pirate's wealth existed in the wrong form. It was coin, plate, and jewels, none of it attached to a legal identity. He could not bank it. He could not buy land under his own name without explaining the name. Every conversion into respectable assets required an intermediary, and every intermediary was a witness. The retirement plan, therefore, competed against arithmetic. Hold the wealth and risk the informant. Spend the wealth and guarantee the return to sea. Most men chose the guarantee. In the ledgers of the period, the same names appear taking prizes, taking pardons, and taking prizes again. The industry called this freedom. An accountant would call it a liquidity trap with rum. Which brings the analysis to the downside cases. And the downside cases are the industry's true financial statements. It matters that the state understood exactly what it was doing with them. An execution for piracy was never just a punishment. It was published. Dying speeches were printed and sold. Bodies were displayed at harbor mouths, where every arriving and departing sailor would pass them. The gallows was the Crown's marketing department, and its message was aimed precisely at the man weighing one more cruise against coming ashore. The following cases should be read the way the authorities intended them to be read, as advertising. Start with William Kidd, who attempted the most respectable exit available: surrender, with connections and a legal defense. He was tried at the Old Bailey on the 8th and 9th of May 1701 for murder and for piracy, including the taking of the Quetta merchant, a prize valued at up to an estimated £70,000. He was convicted on the testimony of his own former crewmen. On the 23rd of May, he was hanged at Execution Dock. The first rope broke. He was hanged again. His body was then gibbeted in an iron cage over the Thames, where it remained for more than 3 years, as a posted notice to every sailor entering London. Kidd's estate went to the Crown. His exit strategy had been the law itself, and the law priced him as an example. Blackbeard's case tested the bribe. Pardoned in June 1718, settled at Bath, socially adjacent to the governor of North Carolina, he held the best protection money could rumor. Within months, he was taking prizes again. The governor of a neighboring colony, Virginia, simply paid for a naval expedition outside his own jurisdiction. On the 22nd of November, 1718, at Ocracoke, Lieutenant Robert Maynard's men killed him in close fighting. Period accounts counted 5 gunshot wounds and some 20 sword wounds on his body. His head was hung from the bowsprit as proof for the payout. The bribe had protected him from one government. His business model had two. Charles Vane tested outright refusal. When the pardon fleet of Governor Woodes Rogers entered Nassau Harbor in July 1718, Vane loaded a captured ship with gunpowder, set it alight, and steered it at the king's ships, escaping in the confusion. The gesture entered legend. The balance sheet followed him anyway. Wrecked, recognized, and returned in chains, he was hanged at Port Royal, by the widely accepted account, in 1721. His colleague, Calico Jack Rackham, had preceded him to the same gallows in November 1720. Defiance, as an exit product, had a redemption value of 0. And for the workforce as a whole, the terminal case came in 1722. After the pirate Bartholomew Roberts was killed off the African coast, 272 of his men were captured. They were tried at Cape Coast Castle in the largest piracy trial ever held. 54 were sentenced to death. 52 were hanged, in public view of the castle walls. The youngest was 19, the oldest was 45. 18 of the bodies were tarred, bound in iron, and hung along the harbor approaches, where weather was expected to keep them legible for years. This was the industry's standard severance package, and by the 1720s it was being paid out at scale. So audit the exits product by product against the outcomes on record. Disappearance consumed the fortune it was meant to protect and left its buyer legally non-existent. Protection lasted exactly as long as the protector's interest, and Blackbeard's protector could not stop a rival government's expedition. Defiance paid nothing and collected everything. The pardon of 1717 was the only product that worked at volume. Hundreds of pirates accepted it, and the Pirate Republic of Nassau dissolved within a year, not by battle, but by buyout. Yet even its best customer is instructive. Benjamin Hornigold, the founding pirate of Nassau, took the pardon, changed sides, and hunted his former colleagues for the new governor. Around 1719, roughly a year into his respectable career, his ship struck a reef and he was lost at sea. The model retiree of the entire Golden Age collected his pension for approximately 12 months. That leaves Henry Every, the man from the cold open, holding 50 years of wages. He sailed home in 1696, dissolved into the English population, and was never captured. He is the only major pirate captain of the era known to have simply gotten away, and yet the last trace of him is a legend, unverifiable, told in Devon, that the merchants he trusted to convert his diamonds into money cheated him of nearly all of it, and that the most successful pirate in history died ashore, in poverty, unable to complain to any court about the theft. The story cannot be confirmed. Its persistence says enough about the odds it describes. The final accounting, then. Revenue, among the highest ever available to a working sailor. Career duration, an estimated 2 years. Exit products, a disappearance that consumed the fortune it protected, a bribe with a single point of failure, and a pardon that converted outlaws into probationers. Successful retirements on record, approximately 1, terms disputed. As an employer, piracy paid 50 years of wages. As a pension plan, it paid the rope. The books balance. The retirees do not.